And today, we are zeroing in on one single randomly drawn competitive bracket from the first round. We're looking at Group 233.
And what a group it is.
It really is. I mean, when you just look at the 4 albums that were forced into this arena together, it just underscores how chaotic and, well, nonlinear music history really is.
Oh, it's an absolutely marvelous mix. You've got different genres, different decades, wildly different production styles, all clashing.
So you have 70s folk rock going up against, what, 80s synth pop genius?
And a 2010s mainstream country, and a 2011 semi-acoustic punk rock reworking. The sheer intellectual gymnastics you'd need to even compare them is just immense.
Okay, let's lay them out. The 4 contenders facing off in Group 233 were History Vinyl by the band America,
Very Best Hits of Erasure by Erasure,
Golden by Lady Antebellum,
and finally Damnesia by Alkaline Trio.
So our mission today is to go beyond just the simple results, right? We want to unpack the specific, the really granular, critical reasoning that the author used to separate these collections.
Exactly. How do you decide when all 4 of them are subjectively good, which 2 are objectively better under the intense pressure of the album quest?
All right, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Right, so let's unpack this group. Group 233, according to the critic, had an immediate and a very decisive victor.
Right.
So while the fight for that second spot was this legendary struggle, first place was taken easily. It just progressed without any question.
And that winner was America's compilation, History, and specifically the vinyl version.
A really powerful victory for a classic collection. So to understand why it won so decisively, we probably need to place America in their sonic context first.
That's the best place to start. The critics situated their material firmly on that easy-listening folk rock Americana continuum, from the early to mid-1970s.
That puts them right alongside some absolute giants, right?
Exactly. I mean, they share DNA with the really complex, polished vocal harmonies and that smooth, slightly melancholic rock sound of the Eagles.
I can hear that.
But they also have that other side, that almost impossible, clean, sentimental, and often acoustic polish of a group like, say, Bread.
Oh, good comparison.
It was a hugely successful genre. Yeah. I mean, it dominated soft rock radio for years, just blending that tight instrumentation with these immediately accessible melodies.
But here's the thing. The critical insight that really sealed the deal for History was something the critic called the familiarity paradox. He notes that he genuinely went into this listening session thinking, this was a compilation he'd never really appreciated before, or at least never sat down with intentionally.
And that's the paradox right there, because within minutes, the critic realized something.
What was that?
That these songs were just deeply, deeply embedded in his cultural memory. He wasn't just enjoying the music on a critical level. He was instantly singing along to tracks he didn't even realize he knew so well.
So it just bypassed the whole need for critical evaluation.
Completely. It jumped straight to pure, unadulterated enjoyment. And that's a huge advantage.
Obviously, everyone knows A Horse with No Name. I mean, that song is just an iconic, inescapable cultural touchstone of that whole era. But what other tracks showed this deep, almost subconscious cultural recognition?
Well, the critic specifically mentioned this immediate, almost joyous recognition of Don't Cross the River.
Okay.
And the very evocative track, Sandman. This wasn't just, background noise from the radio in the past. These were melodic structures and lyrical phrases that instantly felt like old friends.
So that cultural resonance, it acts as a massive competitive advantage.
A huge one. It demonstrates this innate, timeless quality that automatically places the album high on the best of list, simply because it had already won the battle for the listener's long-term affection, years ago.
That's a massive point. This idea of cultural embeddedness versus, say, novelty in a competition to find the greatest album, the one that has already survived the test of time, that's already permeated the collective consciousness. It starts with a huge lead.
It really does. It suggests that time itself acts as its own critical filter. And if an album survives for decades and ends up just residing in your memory without you making a conscious effort to put it there,
then it's achieved something.
It has achieved a level of greatness that a new or a niche album has to work so much harder to attain. But, and this is important, the victory wasn't just sentimental, it was also technical.
How?
Thanks to one truly fascinating production detail.
Okay, let's talk about that. This is the key detail that transforms the specific vinyl pressing from just, a simple greatest hits album into what the critic called a legitimate gem. I'm talking about the George Martin connection.
This detail is absolutely paramount. But the source notes that all the songs on this particular mid-70s pressing of History were not just compiled. They were actively remixed by the legendary Beatles producer George Martin.
The fifth Beatle himself.
The very same. And this was not standard practice for a compilation back then. This was a deliberate quality control move executed by an absolute production heavyweight.
Okay, I have to challenge the significance of that slightly. I mean, for a casual listener, why does the name of the producer, even a name as big as George Martin, matter so much when you're evaluating a folk rock album in a competition like this? Doesn't the music just stand on its own?
It matters intensely in this kind of critical context because George Martin was, well, he was an unparalleled master of sonic architecture and arrangement.
So he wasn't just balancing levels.
Oh, not at all. He was enhancing the emotional impact, the clarity of the recordings. His involvement provided a level of sonic polish and sophistication that was arguably missing from some of the original single mixes.
Okay, can we get specific about what that George Martin touch actually entails here? What did he do that gave the album that perceived Beatle-like quality that the critic noted, particularly on the song Lonely People?
Absolutely. So when the critic senses a Beatle-like quality, what they're likely noticing are Martin's signature techniques. These often involved really sophisticated EQ adjustments, widening the stereo image dramatically.
Making it sound bigger.
Bigger, fuller, more immersive. And critically, his expert use of vocal doubling and compression. Martin specialized in making acoustic guitars just shimmer and blend into this seamless texture, especially when you have complex harmonies like America did.
So with Lonely People, for instance, what would he have done?
On that track, his mix would likely accentuate the precision of the vocal layering. He might also add subtle, almost subliminal orchestral or keyboard elements, things that brought a lushness and a complexity that are really typical of the later Beatles albums he produced.
So his presence fundamentally elevated the fidelity of the collection. It wasn't just about the songs themselves, but about presenting the absolute best possible version of those songs for the competition.
Precisely. His work turned what could have been a standard collection of singles into this curated, sonically perfected listening experience. For a collector and critic who's engaging in the album quest, the presence of George Martin's genius meant this specific version of History wasn't just nostalgically enjoyable.
It was technically superior.
And critically validated. It was a clear, easy, and definitive winner for first place in Group 233. No question about it.
So America is safely through to the next round. Now we have to plunge into the really intense, almost agonizing three-way battle for that final advancing spot.
This is where it gets tough.
We're talking about Lady Antebellum's Golden, Erasure's Very Best Hits, and Alkaline Trio's Damnesia. And the critic himself admitted that separating these three was, and I'm quoting here, a close-run thing indeed.
And this is where the real analytical work begins, because separating them requires setting a critical hierarchy. All three were high-quality collections, no doubt, but they excel in fundamentally different dimensions.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you're comparing peak material strength, which is Erasure, with peak production polish, Lady Antebellum, and then this unique interpretive strength, which is Alkaline Trio.
So three different kinds of good.
Exactly. It's apples and oranges and, I don't know, acoustic guitars.
All right, let's start with the benchmark for modern technical perfection, Lady Antebellum's Golden. This is an album that, by all accounts, sounds incredible, yet it failed to progress.
Yes, the initial critical finding for Golden, which was their fifth studio album, was completely unambiguous. It was rated the best-sounding album of the three remaining contenders.
And that's a testament to modern country rock production, right? Which is often just incredibly slick. Engineered for high fidelity, maximum commercial impact.
Absolutely. The source notes that the musicianship is top draw, and the album is brilliantly produced.
Yeah.
That suggests, total technical mastery.
So if the sound is immaculate, the mixing is perfect, the musicianship is stellar.
Yeah.
Why is that not enough for the album quest? Where did it fall down?
Because in the album quest, technical brilliance is not the ultimate decider. Material strength is. The critic found this really sharp contrast between the impeccable sound and the actual content of the album.
The songs themselves.
The songs themselves. So while the album was technically flawless, luscious, polished, perfectly mastered, The material itself was judged to be the weakest of the three.
Okay, we need to get specific here to justify a critique like that. What exactly makes the material standard country rock or the weakest? Isn't that just subjective taste?
It is subjective, of course, but the critic defines standard here by identifying a lack of innovation or risk. Golden is executed perfectly, but it adheres too strictly to these very established, commercially safe formulas.
So things you'd expect to hear on the radio?
Precisely. The notes imply that many of the tracks follow predictable chord progressions and lyrical tropes that were really common to early 2010s mainstream country radio.
Yeah.
You know, themes of
Trucks, small towns,
generic romantic longing, and these very mid-tempo arrangements. They're just designed for the maximum widest possible appeal.
So the critique isn't that the songs are bad necessarily, it's that they're safe, they're formulaic.
Exactly. They are executed, as the critic says, as straight as can be. And that makes them pleasurable and polished, for sure, but ultimately they're non-essential in a competition that's designed to find the best and most innovative material.
It's like the production is a luxury liner, but the itinerary is the same one every other cruise ship takes.
That's a great way to put it. That technical perfection becomes this beautiful distraction from the lack of any real cutting-edge songwriting.
Was there any track on the album that demonstrated the band's potential to maybe break free of those genre constraints? Anything that stood out?
Yes, there was one. The critic did single out the track All for Love as being an exception.
And why that one?
The observation was that it was the least country ballad on the entire album. This implies that it possessed a more universal pop sensibility, maybe with a richer emotional complexity or a more unusual melodic structure that allowed it to sort of transcend that genre pigeonhole.
So it proved they could write with distinction if they wanted to.
It showed the potential was there, yes.
But one standout track just couldn't save the whole album from the elimination zone.
Precisely. The overall material was just too generic to justify it progressing over more innovative or historically validated opponents. So Golden secure in third place. It set the benchmark for production value, but it failed the test of material originality.
And that establishes a really crucial early rule in this quest, doesn't it?
It does. Technical perfection, even if it's objectively superior, is going to struggle to overcome material that is deemed formulaic.
Okay, so from polished 2010s country, we're shifting dramatically to 80s synth pop brilliance. Erasure's very best hits. This is the album that advanced because the material was deemed superior to Lady Antebellum's, despite being, technically more dated.
Erasure's just a masterclass in songwriting ingenuity.
Yeah.
The duo, Vince Clarke and Andy Bell, they successfully established this innovative and modern-sounding synth pop in the mid-'80s.
And their commercial success wasn't an accident.
Not at all. It was earned through crafting these ridiculously infectious melodies and then pairing them with surprisingly complex, heartfelt, and often quite dramatic lyrics. This 2003 compilation, it rightly focuses on their early powerhouse period.
We're talking about those era-defining tracks that every single generation seems to rediscover. A little respect, sometimes, and the brilliant, oh, l'amour. Why did the critic feel these songs held up so strongly in a, 2023 listening environment?
It's because the strength of the composition completely overrides the constraints of the technology they were using. The critics specifically noted that these early songs stand up beautifully, while still acknowledging that the limitations of mid-'80s synth sound and production are clearly evident.
Let's clarify those technical limitations for the listener, because this is really central to the debate against Lady Antebellum. What did early synth limitations actually sound like?
It meant you had constrained fidelity, often a certain digital thinness to the sound, and limited polyphony.
Which is the number of notes that could be played at the same time.
Exactly. Early digital synths, they just lack the massive resonant bottom end that we expect today. The sounds could sometimes feel a little brittle or slightly rigid. They just didn't have the warmth of analog or the sheer power of modern digital processing.
And yet, despite all of that, the music was innovative.
Highly innovative. The critics singled out "Oh l'Amour" and called it a work of art sound-wise. Now, that suggests that even within those technical restrictions, Erasure's compositional vision was so strong and their sound design so creative that they maximized the emotional and rhythmic potential of the equipment they had.
So they were pioneers.
They were pioneers, whereas you could argue Lady Antebellum were perfecters of an already existing formula.
This leads us directly to that fascinating hypothetical speculation that the critic introduced, that sort of what-if moment.
Yes. The thought experiment regarding modern production. The critic just couldn't help but dream of the absolute magic that would result if a modern production maestro.
He specifically named Calvin Harris.
He did. What if Calvin Harris were allowed to rework these early Erasure tracks? And this isn't a knock on the original production at all. It's a testament to the indestructible nature of the songwriting.
Why do you think he chose Calvin Harris as the perfect hypothetical producer for this?
Well, Calvin Harris represents the current gold standard in electronic pop production. I mean, massive, crystalline clarity, immense headroom, and bass lines that feel physically present in the room with you.
Right.
He specializes in taking simple, perfect melodies and translating them into these global chart anthems with real sonic weight and polish. If you combine Vince Clarke's compositional genius with Harris's 21st century sonic power,
The tracks would be untouchable.
utterly untouchable.
Yeah.
The fact that you can even imagine this hypothetical remix just underscores the raw power of the original compositions. The material is so strong it deserves modern technical perfection.
Now, we mentioned this is a hits compilation, and they're always prone to, tapering off in quality towards the end. Did Erasure's album suffer from this?
It did, yes. The compilation includes their later 90s tracks, their well-known ABBA covers, and what the critic called the fairly decent, albeit unexpected rendition of Peter Gabriel's Salisbury Hill.
So a mixed bag later on.
A definite reduction in momentum and that innovative quality in the second half. However, and this is the key, the sheer undeniable excellence of those early tracks provided such a powerful foundational score that the album maintained enough competitive strength to advance.
So the peaks were just higher.
The peaks were simply higher than Lady Antebellum's perfectly level but unadventurous terrain.
Okay, that brings us to our final contender. Alkaline Trio's Damnesia. A really strong band, consistently good albums, but here they're fighting with a collection of acoustic reworkings.
And context is absolutely crucial for Damnesia. The author noted that this album fits into a recent trend of reworked albums that they've been tracking during the quest.
So we've seen other examples of this in prior groups.
We have, like Evanescence's Synthesis, which featured these big orchestral reworkings, and Spandau Ballet's Once More, which revisited their 80s hits in a new way.
So this subgenre, the revisionist album, is inherently complicated for the album quest. It's asking the critic to judge not the original material, but a new interpretation of that material.
Precisely. And Damnesia, which was released in 2011, is a semi-acoustic, stripped-down presentation of Alkaline Trio fan favorites. It's an exercise in showcasing the underlying songwriting strength, divorced from the electric distortion and the furious pacing of their typical punk sound.
And the critic was clearly impressed by their writing ability. He noted their clever lyricism, which is often a hallmark of good punk rock.
Oh, the band has a real knack for complex wordplay and this kind of morbid poetry. I mean, the album title itself, Damnesia, blending damnation and amnesia.
The clever.
It's an immediate flag for their lyrical sophistication. This intellectual cleverness provides the album with a really strong critical foundation to build on.
So which specific tracks, when they were divorced from their usual punk intensity, really stood out in this acoustic format?
The critic listed several personal trio favorites that translated really well. That includes, this could be Love, Mercy Me, Radio, and Private Eye.
All big songs for them.
All big songs. And the barnstorming opener, Calling All Skeletons, was highlighted as being particularly memorable and surprisingly powerful in this acoustic setting.
He even recommended it for Halloween airplay, I believe.
He did, which shows that the song structures themselves are robust enough to survive that sonic stripping down.
So, okay, we've got undeniable songwriting quality, highly popular tracks, clever execution. Why then did Damnesia place fourth and get eliminated? This seems like a really harsh judgment for what is, by all accounts, a high-quality band.
And this is the critical pivot point. This is the decisive flaw. It's the issue of version fidelity. The critic concluded, and this is the killer line, that these were clearly not the definitive version of the songs. And in a competition that is designed to find the best album, judging a non-definitive version introduces a fatal handicap.
Let's debate this handicap rigorously for a second. If the songwriting is brilliant, why does the version matter so much in this competitive sphere?
Well, it really comes down to emotional impact and sonic identity. When a listener encounters their favorite songs, the definitive version carries the full weight of the memory, of the cultural moment, and the specific sonic choices that defined it. The raw electric urgency of the original Radio, for example.
Right.
The acoustic version, while it might be a brilliant interpretation, inherently sacrifices some of that visceral emotional intensity.
So the album quest is looking for the peak experience, and a stripped-down version, just by its very nature, is a deviation from that peak.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
the difference between judging a champion boxer based on their prime fight footage versus, say, an exhibition match they performed years later. Both display skill, but only one is the definitive high-stakes performance.
So for Damnesia, the emotional landscape was altered.
It was. The intensity that's required for a first or second place finish was just absent because the songs weren't being presented in their most powerful canonical state.
And was the track listing also a factor in the elimination? It wasn't just the format.
No, it wasn't. Compounding the version issue was the inclusion of what the critic deemed lesser favored tracks, specifically Old English 800 and I Held Her in My Arms.
So not all killer, no filler.
Exactly. And while every band has deep cuts, including these arguably less impactful songs in the semi-acoustic, non-definitive compilation, meant the overall package was just too compromised. The collection, in the critics' words, just doesn't quite merit beating anything else here in its current form, and that secured its fourth-place elimination.
Okay, we are now at the crucial inflection point. America won, that's settled. But we have to rigorously justify the ranking of the remaining three.
This is the moment of truth.
We had the innovative, material-strong, but technically dated Erasure, the formulaic material but technically perfect Lady Antebellum, and the brilliant writing but non-definitive versions of Alkaline Trio.
And this challenge right here, the inability to easily separate high-quality but fundamentally different albums, is the entire reason the album quest methodology exists. It forces the critic to establish an inviolable critical hierarchy.
Because when everything is good, the tiebreaker criteria have to be ruthlessly applied.
They have to be.
I have to challenge the premise of the resulting hierarchy before we detail the final rankings. Given the objective technical superiority of Golden by Lady Antebellum, is it truly justified to place an album with dated sound and diminishing returns like Erasure above it? Isn't technical excellence a form of quality that should earn it? So innovation trumps polish. Let's detail the final order and the exact rationale used to break the tie, starting with second place.
Okay. In second place, advancing to round two, we have Erasure's very best hits. They were given the edge because they had the strongest, most innovative, and most emotionally resonant material overall.
Despite the compilation tapering off.
Despite that,
Yeah.
because the Peaks tracks like Oh L'Amour and A Little Respect were just higher and more distinctive than anything Lady Antebellum offered. The sheer power of the material overcomes the dating of the production.
That sends a powerful message to the listener, doesn't it? When you're grading albums, you should favor the unique song over the perfectly recorded standard song.
Absolutely. The critic is rewarding the creative leap, the moment of pure inspiration, even if the vehicle for that inspiration, those mid-80s synths, is a little imperfect by today's standards.
Okay, moving to third place, narrowly eliminated, we find Lady Antebellum's Golden. Why did superior production beat out the high-quality writing of Alkaline Trio?
And this is the second crucial debate. Technical execution versus version fidelity. Golden was ranked above Damnesia because its luscious musicianship and sound provided an objectively superior listening experience.
So even though Lady Antebellum's material was safe, the fact that it was recorded, mixed, and mastered to perfection meant it was a more complete, a more high-fidelity album experience.
Then the compromised, reinterpreted version of Alkaline Trio songs.
I see.
Exactly. The critique against Lady Antebellum was on material. The critique against Alkaline Trio was on format. And when forced to choose between those two flaws, the critic decided that a perfectly executed standard album is a more competitive package than an excellent but non-definitive acoustic interpretation.
The technical polish provided an advantage that the lack of version fidelity just couldn't overcome.
That's it.
And finally, placing fourth and eliminated, Alkaline Trio's Damnesia. This means the core critical takeaway here is that the non-definitive version handicap is perhaps the most difficult one to overcome in the album quest.
It's the death knell in a rigorous competition like this. While the core writing was brilliant, the fact that the tracks were reinterpretations, coupled with the inclusion of those two lesser-favored tracks, meant the overall package was simply too flawed to justify progression.
So the brilliant lyrics and the cleverness inherent in the original songs couldn't compensate.
They couldn't compensate for the sonic and emotional distance that was created by the acoustic format. It was just too big a hurdle.
Let's consolidate that critical hierarchy for the listener then. When you're facing a three-way tie of this nature, the hierarchy established here in Group 233 is material and originality is greater than technical perfection and sonic experience.
Which is greater than Version fidelity and completeness. That is the ultimate extraction of knowledge from this deep dive.
It really is.
It shows that in this specific critical structure, a strong, innovative track is deemed more valuable than flawless sound. And flawless sound is more valuable than hearing a great song in a compromised secondary format.
All right, let's finalize the standings for Group 233, just to confirm who's advancing.
Okay. First place advancing is History Vinyl by America. That's for material, the George Martin remix, and that familiarity factor.
Second place, also advancing, Very Best Hits of Erasure.
For having the strongest material and the most innovation.
Third place, eliminated, Golden by Lady Antebellum.
For pure technical perfection but weak material.
And in fourth, eliminated, Damnesia by Alkaline Trio.
Strong material, but that fatal version fidelity flaw.
Okay, before we move on, the rigor of this album quest. It often throws up these little moments of strange serendipity, and the critic noted one fun final observation that kind of links two of these vastly different albums.
Yes, a lovely little footnote. It really demonstrates the connective tissue of culture, spanning decades and genres. A weird shared reference to The Wizard of Oz between two albums that otherwise share absolutely nothing musically.
It's the kind of detail that really only emerges when you force these disparate collections of music into the same listening space at the same time. Detail that coincidence for us.
The observation was that both America's History and Alkaline Trio's Damnesia contain a separate, specific reference to the Tin Man character from the classic story.
The Tin Man specifically.
The Tin Man.
So on the folk rock side, America.
America's compilation includes their very famous 1974 track, Tin Man. And this is a product of 1970s soft rock Americana, using the character as a metaphor for searching for a soul or a heart.
A classic theme. And then 37 years later, the acoustic punk reworking from Alkaline Trio contains its own reference.
Indeed. It was found in the lyrics of the track Nose Over Tail on Damnesia. And the specific line is, "Meanwhile, tin men, led by little girls."
That is genuinely fascinating. You have two entirely different approaches, one using the character as the title of a huge radio hit, the other using it as this passing evocative metaphor in a punk lyric.
And both of them are drawing on the exact same secondary character, and they end up in one randomly generated group.
It's remarkable.
The critic rightly acknowledged that, The Wizard of Oz is deeply entrenched in Western culture. Its themes, its imagery, they're entwined throughout our culture. But even allowing for that cultural omnipresence,
the odds are still pretty long.
I mean, the mathematical probability of two albums, separated by decades of sonic evolution, being randomly grouped together, and both referencing the Tin Man specifically, not Dorothy, not the Scarecrow, but the Tin Man, it's just a moment of pure, delightful synchronicity.
It's a rewarding example of how the album quest, despite its brutal competitive nature, can still reveal this hidden, unexpected cultural DNA that's shared across a vast music library.
It's the universe winking at the collector.
Exactly. A brief, welcome distraction before the intensity of round two begins.
Absolutely.
What a rigorous breakdown of Group 233. We saw America just sail through, lifted by that cultural weight and the sonic perfection provided by a legendary producer's remix.
And we saw a ruthless tiebreaker that secured Erasure's spot, demonstrating that innovative songwriting really does trump technical perfection when the competition is this fierce.
And critically, we watched two really high-quality albums, Lady Antebellum's Golden and Alkaline Trio's Damnesia, get eliminated for two very distinct reasons.
Material that was too formulaic and a format that was non-definitive. The album quest just doesn't forgive small compromises when the stakes are this high.